Okay, welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a few minutes. Just let me loosen up a bit. And I need to let everybody know that the stream is getting started. So just give me a minute to put the links out there for everybody. This is What's up, Sean S. Christopher Clipper. Glad to see you here. Nightwing B. I'm V1. Glad to see you all here. And tonight's topic, what's up, Quinn Batiste? Tonight's topic, I'm going to be asking a critical question about the comic book industry. And that critical question is the comic book industry its own worst enemy? And the reason why I ask that critical question is because when I look at what your Tom King and Dan Dido just did with your Heroes in Crisis number 8, I have to wonder if the comic book industry is its own worst enemy because these comic publishers, it seems that every time they get to taste a little success as related to their publishing endeavors, they go out here and do things to undermine their own success. Now, a couple of years ago, after the complete failure of the New 52 for DC Comics, we had Jeff Johns come in with Rebirth. And after Jeff Johns came in with Rebirth and managed to bring many readers back to DC Comics, we now have Tom King, who decided with Heroes in Crisis number 8 to go out here and decide to make Wally West the killer of all the heroes in Heroes in Crisis, in the Heroes in Crisis story. And when he murdered all those characters, it wound up destroying all of the goodwill that Jeff Johns spent trying to reconnect all of the angry comic fans back to DC Comics, and it destroyed all of the goodwill that was just tried to there was built up over the last couple of years. So a lot of people, they really are Wally West fans out there. They love that character because he has a connection as a legacy character to Barry Allen the Flash, and he took on the mantle of the Flash with Crisis of Infinite Earths. And when he came into the to start the Rebirth, people thought that things were going to head back down the road to something resembling the classic DC universe, or the possibility of us getting something like the classic DC universe. So people thought that with Wally West back, that things were going to be getting better for DC Comics as a brand, but all of those hopes have been shattered over the last couple of months, with starting with Tom King and Batman number 50, where he decided to destroy the Batman Catwoman wedding. And then he later on we got the Heroes in Crisis, where now Wally West has revealed to be the killer of all of those heroes, and that he went out of his way to willfully and intentionally cover it up. And that action over at DC Comics makes me believe that many in the comic book industry, they are their own worst enemies as related to the business of publishing, because anyone who understands the business of publishing understands that you don't, just when you're starting to get a book to sell, you don't go out of your way to alienate your customers and your customer base. But when it looks like with every time the comic book industry starts to get some momentum moving forward, they always do something to impede their progress. And part of the reason why I believe that they do things to impede their progress has to do with a lot of these people who are now currently working in publishing not having any sort of publishing experience, because the person who is in charge of DC Comics right now, Dan Dido, has no publishing experience. And because he has no publishing experience, he just doesn't understand how the business of publishing works. And because he doesn't understand how the business of publishing works, what he does is he winds up cutting off his nose to spite his own face. So whenever he goes out here and he has some sort of success, he winds up impeding his own success. And when you don't have experience in publishing, you don't understand how it works. And that's what I see with Dan Dido. He just, even though he's been here for over 20 years, he doesn't have that foundation in publishing like I have. And he goes out here and he just winds up impeding his own success, because in publishing, success is something that you gain slowly through building up your stories over time and building up a relationship with the reader. But with your Dan Dido, over the last 15, 20 years, he's just gone out of his way to alienate readers, because he has this idiotic notion that an angry reader is an engaged reader. And from what I saw with Heroes in Crisis number 8, yeah, readers were angry and getting emotional on social media, but they weren't getting engaged enough to go out here and develop the word of mouth that you need to go out here and sell product to customers. Because in order for you to sell books, you have to engage the reader, and you have to make sure that they're so satisfied by what they read that they want to go out here and not only buy the next book, but they want to share the previous books with their friends and their family so that they can want to go out and anticipate the next book. So he's got this notion that angry readers are engaged, but from what I saw, angry readers aren't engaged. Angry readers disengage, and angry readers stop reading the comic overall and move on to other products. He's thinking that they're going to be angry and continue to engage, but what they do when they do engage is they become so angry that they just walk away. And I saw people who were at their wits' end when they saw the Heroes in Crisis number 8, and they didn't want anything to do with DC Comics at that point. Now, the same business model is being used at Marvel Comics right now, and over at Marvel Comics, they just are out here. They're their own worst enemy, because they are out here trying to promote this social justice agenda and this identity politics agenda, and this agenda just hasn't worked. And what they try to do is try to force the reader to go out here and buy their products, but the readers just aren't interested in buying the product. They just don't care about products when the company goes out of its way to actively insult people and actively insult their intelligence. So that's where I see where over at Marvel, they are their own worst enemy, and over at DC, they are their own worst enemies, because when it comes down to today's comic book industry, they seem to get in the way of their own success, because they could actually have success if they would just stop trying to force things to work and just go along with what's working. For example, over at DC Comics, they had a Superman run that was done by Dan Jurgens and Peter Tomasi that was selling very well and doing very strongly. And your Dan Dido decides, because he wants to hire Brian Michael Bendis to spite Marvel, he decides to end that run, and he decides to cancel another book which was doing well, The Super Sons, because he doesn't like that type of story, and he doesn't like, and he wants to give Brian Michael Bendis a fresh canvas to work with. And by doing that, what he does is he winds up destroying all of the sales momentum that that book had, because the book was selling at 40,000 units, which was very good for a comic book these days. And the word of mouth on both Superman and Super Sons was strong. Now, in a trade publishing world run by seasoned publishers, if those books are selling, what people do is they let those books ride, because those books are getting an audience. They're building a word of mouth. And because they are building a word of mouth, what people do is let those books ride, build that audience, build that readership, and they continue to make that money. And then they continue to capitalize on that audience that's already there, because that's what any publisher who is smart does. But in the comic book industry, when books are selling, what the publishers do is they go out of their way to cancel those books and kill their momentum. And when you kill a book's momentum, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up hurting your own sales, because that's what happened in the case of Batman after that 50th issue, where people were anticipating the Batman Catwoman wedding, that payoff for their story, and then they got a big middle finger from your Tom King. And then with Heroes in Crisis, and then with the Superman run, they were expecting something great to pay off, but then they got undermined by editorial deciding to bring in Brian Michael Bendis. And then you have this Heroes in Crisis #8, which is, as I believe, to be the nail in the coffin for your DC Comics, because people were holding on, anticipating return to something like the classic DC universe, or possibly the classic DC universe coming back after Doomsday Clock. But when they look at what happened in Heroes in Crisis with Wally West, that has literally discouraged all of those people who were still buying comics from having any more incentive, because it looks like your Dan Dido wants to take us back to New 52 2.0, something that has already failed once before, and failed so badly that it hurt DC to the point where they couldn't even sell merchandise like action figures and t-shirts, and they want to go back to that. And it just shows how this comic book industry is its own worst enemy. And as its own worst enemy, it undermines its own success. And that's a real serious trait of many of these so-called nice guys, is that they go out of their way to undermine their own success, because the success isn't coming the way they want the success to come. The success is coming a way that is different, and they want that success to come one way. They want to be able to say that the things that they did were a hit. However, in the publishing world, it just doesn't work like that. In the publishing world, whenever you have a hit, you just go with the flow. Because in the publishing world, 90% of all books fail, and you have to work with those 10% that sell. And if those books are selling, you just go with that flow, because that's where you want. That's because that's going to make you money. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to do, is make that money. D. Woodward makes a good point. Never insult your customer base. And the comic book industry has gone out of its way to insult the customer base. And an angry reader is a disappearing one, because nobody's going to sit there and be insulted and disrespected by the publisher. And hi, Leah, Bot Boy VS, and he asked, why is he not fired yet? And I addressed that in a video where I think this guy has serious white privilege, because he has completely failed over the last over 20 years, and he still continues to have a job. But he is another part of this comic book industry, which has the industry in a serious slump. And when I'm looking at it is, from a critical perspective, someone who really has no publishing experience, and because he has no publishing experience, this is a big problem for them. But as I see it, overall, the industry has been its own worst enemy over the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years, because every time one of these books starts to get a following, every time it gets a readership, these people in the comic book industry wind up stopping these books' momentum before they can really generate any sort of speed. So every time a book starts to get some success, they just wind up impeding that success, and that's something that's really quite troubling when I think about it, because it's just something that it just really is troubling to me, because people who want success, they're just going to keep trying and keep pushing towards getting that success, and they're going to keep persevering and trying to get what's going to be successful. They're not going to trip up over their own feet and undermine themselves. They're going to go out here and work with what's working for them. Now, for example, with the SJS Direct imprint, when I started launching books, and I started seeing books doing well, like the E-Steam series, I just continued to push out more E-Steam stories. Now, the first story, E-Steam No Good Deed, I put out there for free. It was only like a 3 or 4 page story, and I put it out there, and it got 3,000 downloads on that summer. And after I saw the 3,000 downloads, I immediately just started pushing out production of E-Steam stories. Now, I originally just was going to do it as a one-off story, but once I saw the book had success, I decided to go into full gear. Same thing with All About Nikki. I did a 3-episode preview book on Smashwords, and that book was incredibly popular over the summer of 2011, the early part, and that's when I decided to do the whole first season book later on. And once I saw those books doing well, I went out here and I continued to push out other books because I saw those books doing well, and I went where the customers were going. And that's another problem that I see going on with the comic book industry, is that they're just not following the customer, and they're not looking to serve the customer. It's a lot of people looking to serve themselves. And in a very fragile business like publishing, if you're going out here looking to serve yourself, you're going to put yourself out of business. And this is another problem where as I see it with the comic book industry, is people are looking to make the products they like and not looking to make the products that the customer likes. And that's why they never get to move to that next level, because they just keep trying to give people what they want instead of sitting there and looking at the numbers and seeing what the customer wants. Now, I'm always looking at my sales numbers, and I go where the customers are going. And if I see the customers buying a certain product, I go out here and I make more of that product. And if I see the customers going out here and picking up, another book, I'm just going to keep continuing to produce those books. And, I look at the comic book industry, and it's like O'Meal was making the point. Yeah, they keep trying to pander to customer bases that don't support them or don't even exist. Like when I look at your SJW Marvel, they are out here trying to appeal to these customer bases that just aren't interested. Now, your demographics for comics say, look, the median age of a comic reader is 45 years old, and it's getting older. And you have these people trying to make these far left comics, and they're thinking that they're going to get these younger readers. Unfortunately, you're not going to get any younger readers, because you have no content that appeals to younger readers or even talks to what younger people are experiencing or what they're dealing with. And this is one of the things they're trying to do, is they're trying to appeal to these new audiences, but you're not telling stories that come from their experiences or tell the people or show them the world that they know. Now, your Marvel, run by your son Amanat, says that it's the world outside your window. But when I read their comics, I don't see the world outside my window. I see a very disconnected world. I see a world that doesn't look like our world, doesn't look like anything that I relate to in the world that I live in. And I don't see the people that I interact with on the streets. So I mean, I look at these stories. I would sit there, I'd read Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, Squirrel Girl. I even read Spider-Man and Iron Man. I don't see my world, and I don't see the world that I knew with these characters. So I don't see anything that relates to anyone in these comics, and that's why they're having a tough time selling them. But in their own world, they are celebrating the success of getting a book out, but they're not really looking at how those books are doing, and they don't see how they are just undermining themselves. Hey, Chris Brown. Chris is the publisher of Omega Black, this great African American manga. And this great African American manga, you can find it on Amazon.com and Comixology in paperback, and you can find it on Comixology in the digital format. It's great manga. I highly recommend you pick it up. It's a really great comic, and he's going to have a Kickstarter, I believe, going on in May. So you really want to pick that up because his book is very good, and I would love to see it be a success. And he's doing everything right as related to business perspective. And when I'm looking at the comic book industry, they could learn a lot from him because a lot of these people, they are their own worst enemies, and they come from this perspective of they want things their way. You're welcome, Chris. I really want to see you have that success. That's why I always try to promote you in every live stream. Patrick makes a good point. Those comics they make now, they look like a fourth grader activity from a book fair, which is a fair assessment because I was looking at a Facebook post and they were asking, why are all these comic shops closing? And the reason why they are closing is because of the content that is being produced. And a lot of these comic publishers, again, they don't understand economics, and they don't understand that you have to supply product that the customer has to demand, and you have to create stories that the customers care about. So you have to create something people want in order for these stores to survive. These stores have been suffering over the last couple of years because they believe they have to keep ordering this product, and the customers don't want the product because of the insults they have received from these comic publishers who want to try to shove their ideas on the readers, and they don't want those ideas, they don't want those products, but they keep trying to shove them on them, so the customers don't buy them. The shops wind up get stuck with them due to Diamond's distribution and the no return policy. And what happens is the shops wind up closing because they are stuck in the middle, and they have started to suffer as a result. And this is why we're seeing comic shops closing so many. And Travis makes a good point. Yeah, you can read them for free on certain websites, the pirated comics, but people would go out and buy them even with the pirates if the books were good. But the books just aren't good anymore, and they're not of any sort of quality, and that's why people aren't going out and buying these books or have a reason to anticipate buying those books. Assassin's Creed fan, he makes a good point. Yeah, the Batman comics have gotten really too dark. I mean, it's just not the Batman I grew up with. I remember watching Bad Blood on Netflix, and it's just too dark. Overall, Batman is supposed to be a balanced character. I mean, it's so dark that they've forgotten the knight, and they've forgotten the chivalry, and they've forgotten Batman's code of honor, because Batman is supposed to be someone who doesn't want the tragedy that befell him to fall on others, and that's why he goes out of his way to stop these criminals, and that's also why he goes out of his way to help others, like your Dick Grayson or your Jason Todd or your Tim Drake. But these days, Batman is almost as bad as the villains these days. And part of that is due to DC's editorial, and the other part has to do with Tom King. But the last couple issues of Batman have been really disturbing. I mean, there was a whole sequence where Thomas Wayne and Bane are having a fight, which had some very disturbing adult gay undertones, and another book which was drawn by Amanda Conner, which makes a complete mockery of the Batman character, where the women show absolutely no respect for Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent's legacies. Black Boy makes a good point. Yeah, the 80s and 90s Batman comics are really good. I highly recommend you get the Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle run. Those books are great. And the Robin miniseries and the ongoings, those were some really good ones. Mobar 7170 asks a question. What are my future plans for John Haynes, East-Team, and ISIS? I'm still working on the 2020 stories. Right now, I just released the 2019 books for ISIS and East-Team. ISIS, all that upside down. ISIS, All That Glitters. This is the newest ISIS story where ISIS takes on the bikini-clad bank robber Goldenshine. And this one is designed to pay a homage to comic book superhero stories. And East-Team, Goddess of deals with the events of East-Team Ascension, where East-Team got brand new powers. So what I'm doing with East-Team right now in the future is I'm working on her new powers, because she no longer is a demon anymore. And we're going to be exploring her relationship with Christ, and we're also going to be exploring her new avatar powers that she has received. So you really want to pick these up to learn more about East-Team. And with Isis, the Goddess Next Door, I am continuing to develop the second story arc, where the Isis character is going all around, learning from her different experiences and going where she's needed. And she's going where she's needed now to take on this bikini-clad bank robber. But the next story I'm working on has to deal with the Nemesis arc, which is Isis, the main event. And that story is what I'm working on right now. With John Haynes, I have 2 books going on. I have Dark Succubus. I'm getting ready to go. I'm just waiting for Mike to get back to me with the cover art, and Mike Williams, because he did a Conversation with Death's cover, and I'm waiting for him to get back to me with that. And I just finished The Man with Nothing to Lose, which is going to be the 3rd book. And I'm hoping to get to work on the 4th book, which was Taking Care of Business. So I'm doing layouts for that story. And these are my future plans for these characters. But I wouldn't mind doing a crossover with any manga company or any comic company. I have a lot of ideas for that, and if a company wanted to do that with me, I would be glad to do that. So if you want to, that's what I'm going to be working on right now. Isis, All That Glitters is available in paperback, and it's also available on Kindle Unlimited. You can read that for free on Kindle Unlimited. And East-Team, Goddess of is available on paperback and Kindle Unlimited right now. And you can get East-Team Ascension if you want to learn about the change in East-Team's powers. You can get all those on Amazon. But that's what my plans are. I'm like halfway through the new ISIS story I'm supposed to do, and I'm hoping to start work on a East-Team story. And I want to do another ISIS story called Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, which got eaten by my computer when it crashed, and now I'm going to try to restart that story. And that one's a big event story. It's going to feature everybody. But those are my plans for those characters. And if some comic company wanted to do that with me, I'd be glad to do that. Reading through the chats now. Yeah. But I heard about MK11. The graphics are good, but I don't know why everybody's so caught up in a controversy over it. Yeah, I saw that part with what is it? That new character where Jax got emasculated. Cetrion. I saw that part. Yeah, I saw that with wait. Yeah, I saw what happened to poor Scorpion. But that's what happens when. Oh, I'm glad that you enjoy. I'm glad your son enjoyed the conversation with Death. Mobar 7170. I think you'll both enjoy All That Glitters and East-Team, Goddess of. When I did the Conversation with Death, I did that to be a all ages family story and a fun story. And I'm getting ready to do Dark Succubus, but Dark Succubus heads into the PG-13 zone with that one. So be warned, that one's a little has a scene that's a little, it's a PG-13, but All That Glitters is family friendly, and Esteem Goddess of is all ages. I'm still trying to get this Indiegogo to go somewhere as related to All That Glitters, the All That Glitters comic book. Still working on that. I'm going to try to leave a link in the I would love to do a John Haynes comic on me. Everybody says that John Haynes, it reminds them so much of Constantine, and I believe it would have been a good fit for Vertigo, another publishing division that really was its own worst enemy, because they went out here and hired this guy who has no experience as the editor-in-chief. He launched all these terrible books, and I believe if they had launched The Conversation with Death, there would have been a big hit over in Vertigo as their imprint, because it is one of the better sellers on the SJS Direct imprint. And I believe if they had it there, it would have probably sold 50,000 units easy. But I would love to do a John Haynes comic. I would love to do an ISIS comic. I mean, I wish I could get the Indiegogo funded to have samples of my work to show people, but it's right now it's 1% funded, and it's going to be due May 4th. So I may have to try another strategy if I hope to get a comic out there. I haven't read Batman Who Laughs, so I can't really make an observation on it. How would I run DC Comics if I were the boss, Mecha Slasher 88? I would try to fix this dreadful continuity that they have right now. I would try to get everything back to classic DC Universe, because what DC needs to do is create a classic DC Universe. And then I would try to do things as related to creating the DC Universe and making it a bit tighter and having a smaller catalog, because I believe a smaller catalog would make DC competitive. You have the classic characters plus a tight catalog and those stories that are really just focusing on making the characters great. I believe you could bring DC Comics back to being competitive and getting those sales up. I mean, I would love to do a core titles with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, and I would like to do a static book if I was running DC Comics, and some milestone books as well. But it would be a small catalog, and the DC Universe would be with everybody in their classic costumes, so that I can get the casual readers. And I would be focused more on making the DC Universe more all ages stories, and doing things like bringing some characters with Vertigo, and bringing back books like Constantine, because you need those books to sell in order to keep the brand going and keep the brand strong. Because what's happened with DC's continuity right now is it's just really a jumbled mess, and it's just hard to follow. I mean, I've been a comic fan ever since I was 4 years old, and it's hard for me to understand a lot of the stuff going on with these comics these days. And when a new reader is going to come in, he's going to have a nightmare, trying to understand things. I mean, right now with the SJS Direct imprint, it looks like people aren't having any trouble at all. With the ISIS series or the E-Steam series, they have no problem picking up the books, whether it be the most recent book or an older book. They have no problem picking up the books and understanding the continuity of the storylines, because the story structures are very solid. And what's the thing with the comic book industry right now is a lot of the models and structures are fine, but the problem is you don't have any editorial in charge that has any sort of vision, because many of these people don't have any sort of experience in publishing or know how to set a course or navigate a course for the universe or storytelling. They're trying to tell these big event stories in the hopes of getting people into these big events when what we need right now are single issue stories and 3 issue arcs that are all ages and open people up to comics, but we're not getting that. And the comic publishers, they just keep going around and around, and this vicious cycle continues to drive the industry further in because the people in the industry are their own worst enemies. They every time they get success, they wind up undermining themselves and alienating more people than who would have come in. And the new readers, they are on the wayside because they just can't understand anything because they go out here and make a bunch of events like your Heroes in Crisis, or they make storylines like what they did with Doomsday Clock. They just turn people away. Yeah, they made it. 52 made people walk away, and then the Rebirth made it worse because of Dan Dido coming back. Because Rebirth was getting ready to set up for a course to take us back to Classic, but then it got derailed by Tom King and Heroes in Crisis, and the Doomsday Clock, I think, is going to get derailed just as well. But the way they did things is like Heroes in Crisis is like the Identity Crisis, whereas Identity Crisis was the jump the shark for the entire DC universe. Heroes in Crisis is the exact same thing for the Rebirth. And yeah, they just keep delaying it because they want to try to tweak the story, and they want to try to tweak the story to take us back to this new 52 model. But what your Jeff Johns wanted to do, he wanted to take us back to Classic, and I saw where he was going with it. And he wants to take us back to Classic because that's the only thing that's going to save the DC brand at this point, because the DC brand is, it needs to go back to Classic. Everybody needs to go back to Classic costumes, and we need to get that back because the new readers, they can't understand anything, and the old readers are just alienated, and they're alienated because they're not seeing a payoff as related to stories. So they're not seeing that story that pays off. I mean, that's one of the big problems that Tom King has, is that he'll set up something really big, and then instead of paying the reader off with a climax that's satisfying and a conclusion that's satisfying, what he does is he just does something that makes you mad, and then you don't want to buy the book anymore, like Batman 50, Mr. Miracle, and Heroes in Crisis. And if you're a writer, you don't want to upset your readers. You don't want your readers to leave unsatisfied because they're not going to have any sort of incentive to go out and buy the next issue or continue picking up the back issues. So when I look at that, at what he did with Batman 50, I mean, he's talking about trying to sell 100 issues. You've already shot yourself in the foot because you didn't give me the payoff I wanted. I mean, people in a 50th issue, they want a major change, and he just stuck a middle finger up at people, and that's what led to the drop off on that book. And because when you look at Green Lantern 50 from 1993 or so, when Hal Jordan became Parallax, they gave you a big payoff, and then they gave you an even bigger payoff with Kyle Rayner. So they gave you a payoff, and the same thing with Flash number 50, when I believe what's it called, the Kilgore had Flash, Wally West had gotten injured, and the Kilgore had healed him, and then he got his new costume. You got a payoff, so you have to give your readers some sort of payoff to give them an incentive to keep reading. And this is something that today's modern editors just don't understand about payoffs. Now, payoff, when I was doing the E-Steam series, E-Steam Ascension was a payoff to all the readers who picked up The Temptation of John Haynes and several of the ISIS books and the E-Steam series. This was the big payoff for the reader. And when we see the E-Steam character grow to the point where she overcomes her own fears and overcomes Delilah in the story, and as she overcomes Delilah, she gets the power to defeat her, and then she gets the new powers from Osiris, and that's the payoff for the reader. So I try to pay off the reader with a story with East Team Ascension, or like with Isis All About the Goddess, which was the end of the first Isis story arc. This was the book that paid off the 7 books of the Isis series, because that's when Isis decides to really commit to being the student of life instead of trying to be the teacher. She just commits to being the student, and that's the payoff for the first storyline, which leads into the second storyline, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and that's what starts the second arc. So you have to pay your readers off, and DC has not done a good job of that, and Marvel hasn't done a good job of that. Hardcore H, yeah, I've heard about Marvel's plans with the Eternals film, and if they do that, that's going to be the nail in the coffin for Marvel Studios. I mean, Avengers Endgame, from what I've read, that story, it's a jumbled mess, and it looks like it's going to usher in the age of SJW Marvel. So that means the garbage we saw in many of these SJW comic books, we're going to see on screen. So if they're going to do that, then it's just time to abandon ship and walk away from the movies. Mecha Slasher makes a good point. Yeah, they would do well to start doing comics like Archie, where every issue is one story. That's how you get the readers, because you have to sell the book that's in the reader's hands. And if you don't sell the book that's in the reader's hands, then people can't get to know the characters, because people buy books for characters. They don't really buy them. I don't know if I can do a review of Shazam. It depends on what my schedule is, because I've been so busy with videos and live streams. I got to find the time to go see Shazam. The only way I might be able to see it is either on DVD, or I might be able to see it when it comes to streaming. But that's when I'd probably be able to do a review of it. It'll be late, but that's just the way I have to work, because I'm doing so much work these days. Supremo, I wanted to go see it, but just my schedule's really been busy. Yeah, independence will be the future, and yeah, people, they are tired of this propaganda in the media. They're tired of the identity politics, and they're tired of being told what to think. And that's one of those things that had people going to things like Indiegogos, like the one I'm trying to do right now, because people, they want to get fresh stories. Well, that's interesting. Mobar 7170. Is it spelled SEAN, or is it for SHAUN? But okay. But yeah, independents are the future, and there's some great ones out there. I just pledged to Raymond Leonard's solo comic. Josh Howard, he's going to be having. It's spelled like that, SHON. Josh Howard, he has a great comic, T-Bird and Throttle, that's coming out. He just is finished, I believe, the second issue. Is getting ready to get ready to give those perks out. And Mike Williams has the Geek Sledge strip going on. There's a lot of great comics out there, and you have to just go look for them. I mean, I've been on the web, and I've seen a lot of great web comics. I've seen a lot of great comics out there, but you just have to go look for them, and you have to look past the Marvel label and the DC label. And those stories are out there, but they just can't get the press that these people in the industry have, because a lot of people in the industry, they are just so caught up in what they want to push on people that they can't see that you produce what the audience wants, not what you want. Hardcore H makes the good point that Spider-Man Far From Home that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to see Spider-Man Far From Home, because I got enough identity politics thrown at me with the Spider-Man Homecoming, and that's why I decided to just start to sit out after Infinity War, because I saw the direction of the MCU, and I wasn't happy with the direction of the MCU. They're not giving us, stories with superheroes anymore. Now they're just pushing agendas, or they're just writing stories that make absolutely no sense. And that's why I'm not going to see Endgame, because I read Endgame, watched the synopsis for Endgame, and it just compromises what superheroes are supposed to stand for. And that was some of the things that really irritated me about Endgame, is that we see the heroes doing what the villains do, and there's no line of demarcation really between them. That's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want people getting upset talking about don't spoil the end game, but it's a movie that's just not worth your time. Yeah, they use a lot of shock and gimmicks. Um, what's my opinion of the Joker spinoff? That's another movie I'm going to pass on because it just doesn't look like it's worth it. When it comes down to DC, they were doing very well until that Joker trailer came along. I mean, Shazam was good, Aquaman was good, Wonder Woman was good. This Joker looks like a step back for them, and it really was a movie they just didn't need to do. I mean, it wasn't. It looked like something that was a waste of time and a waste of resources, and they just didn't need to do that film. Because they had good momentum going until that, but it's just something that I wouldn't want to go see, and that's probably why they gave it an October date. So I'm gonna try to get back. But when it comes down to this comic book industry, they did it. They just, I mean, I see where they can come out of this slump that they're in, but it takes somebody who understands that when you have success, step out of your own way. And that's what I look at the comic book industry. It's like just as soon as you start doing well, you start stepping in your own way. And that's something I learned to not do, is step in my own way. Because if you step in your own way, then the success you have will turn into failure. And this is what I'm seeing with DC Comics, and I'm seeing especially with Dan Dido. It's like you just keep getting in the way of this company from being successful. If you have books that are selling and making money, you just leave those creative teams alone. You don't put them in any events. You don't really do anything. You just let those books sell, and you focus on trying to get other books to sell by recruiting talent that will help those books sell. And like, for example, with the whole Jurgens and Tomasi, they had Superman on track. So okay, I'll leave Jurgens and Tomasi alone, and I'll let their books go on, and then I'll focus on one of these books that's selling poorly, and I'll try to, if Brian Michael Bendis wants to come in and show me something, he's got to show me something on a weaker title that's not selling. But he just doesn't understand how it works. He doesn't understand how publishing works. So he'll go out here and tinker with books that are selling, and then cause them to drop. And then he'll go out here and recruit talent that is grossly unqualified, like your Kelly Sue DeConnick and your G. Willow Wilson, and have them drop the sales of books that were doing okay, like Aquaman and Wonder Woman. And that's how this guy is his own worst enemy. I mean, War of the Realms, what do I think of that one? That's another event we don't need right now because it's just a jumbled mess. And the whole Thor character has been a mess for a couple of years now, ever since they cut off his arm, made him unworthy. And that whole War of the Realms is a disaster of an event. And it shows that the event model has run its course. So that's what I think of War of the Realms. It's just another cash grab event. But comic fans are tired of events. Events used to sell weaker books, which are the B and C books, but these days they just wind up slowing down even the progress of the A books. So I look at these comics that coming out with this events model, they just need to stop with events altogether. If I was editor-in-chief at either Marvel or DC, I would stop producing events, and I would start focusing more on milestones. Now, a milestone type story is something like an E-Steam Ascension, where you get this big payoff for all the stories you've read, and it's the conclusion of the story arc. I'll be focusing more on those milestones rather than focusing on doing some big crossover event, because the milestones are going to get readers into the story, and it's going to get them interested in picking up the backstory. Where do you go to look at sales? LKM Cherokee, you go to Comic-Con, and that'll show you what the shops are ordering, and that'll give you the numbers for what they're ordering. Yeah, Mobar 7170. Sadly, yeah, the SJW cash cow is about to dry out. Yeah, I have to agree with you on that, because people don't watch these shows with the identity politics. They don't watch these stories with the far leftist narrative, and people, when they see it, they walk away. I'm going to have to look at JLU versus the Fatal Five. I'm going to get a DC Universe sub soon, so I'm going to take a look at that. Yeah, I heard about what they did to Thor and emasculating him in that relationship, and that's another thing that makes people not want to buy comics. And they do this intentionally because over at Marvel, because they like getting the controversy from these websites, but those websites don't lead to sales. Those websites, yeah, you'll get a lot of hits on a website, and this is something that Sana Ahmed and the people at Marvel don't understand is, yes, these things get a lot of attention from these bloggers and these websites, but bloggers and websites don't buy books. Casual readers go out of their way to buy books, and the whole thing is you want to get those casual readers when you buy books. And Supremo, yeah, I miss classic events like Acts of Vengeance and Inferno. I mean, Acts of Vengeance was one of the best events ever produced, but that was because John Byrne was in charge of it. And he did a good job of navigating the Marvel Universe and showing us how these different matchups could lead to some interesting stories. And we got some classics out of that, like Thor versus Juggernaut and the launch of the New Warriors. We got the new Psylocke out of that, the Ninja Psylocke. There was a lot that came out of that storyline, and that event really sold comics because it was all about basic good guy and bad guy storytelling. But the event model, as it stands today, I believe it's just got to die, and we need to go back to standalone issues, and we need to go back to books that are just selling, and because the characters and the stories, that's the thing we need to focus on. But today's editors, they don't have any experience and they don't understand. They're just trying to shock people and get their attention, not understanding that you don't want to get people's attention with a gimmick or a stunt. You want people to see what's on the page is solid, because if you see what's on the page is solid, then you're going to have incentive to keep picking up those books and keep buying those books. And yeah, I wish we had if you're going to do things, it should be like Acts of Vengeance. That twist was one of the best I ever saw in a story. I heard about Leviathan, and that's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a complete disaster because Brian Michael Bendis, he has really lost his craft, and it shows in that Iron Man run with Riri Williams, and it shows in recent books he's done, like Wonder Twins and Naomi. He just doesn't have it anymore as a writer, and DC is about to take a bath on his bad writing because the contract they signed was a messed up one. And again, another sign that the industry is its own worst enemy, because you put all this money into a guy who has not had a proven sales record. He's just a name in the comic book world. But a smart editor is going to say, yeah, he's a name in the comic book world, but I'm looking at his sales, and his sales just aren't there. And yeah, he's only good at street stories and crime fiction, and I would only leave him there. But I believe he was already beaten by that. I mean, we had this another book that showed an example of how the comic book industry is its own worst enemies. You had Mark Waid and Chris Samney on Daredevil, and it was doing strong, and the book was selling, but then they went and rebooted it, and that was just another stupid move, because you have a book that's selling again, and you just undermine yourself and undermine your momentum, and it's just one of those things you just don't do in publishing. If you're a publisher and you have something selling again, you keep the same numbering, you keep the same run, because this is going to continue to get those numbers in. Yep. I'm reading it. Yeah, I was not happy with that Spider-Man run either. I mean, they don't know whether they want to make him a success, and now they've just turned him into a bum. I mean, I know Peter Parker has bad luck, but what they've done to Spider-Man has ruined the character. I mean, he's lost his direction, and that's because they don't have any craftsman writers to work on this character to get him back on track. But Spider-Man has been messed up since the Clone Saga, as I see it. And then you had One More Day, which really derailed the character's momentum. And he's a character that is in desperate need of a really good writer to come in and clean up the mess, because Spider-Man just needs to be a street hero and he needs to be focused on his rogues gallery. That's the way I see it. Mecha Slasher 88 says, do I think DC Comics will die off soon? I don't. With Warner Brothers running the corporate thing, I don't think it's going to die off. I think what will happen is they will fold it into another publishing division, and that publishing house is going to impose standards on it, and those standards are going to make it more of a family-oriented brand. But you have Dan Dido, he's still there. People are saying, oh, he's the best thing to happen to them, or he could have kept things from getting worse, but he's already made things so bad that no one wants to buy DC Comics anymore. J. Bob, what do I think about Valiant? They're in a really teeter-tottery place right now because they've hired a lot of these SJWs. They were actually doing very well for some time, and then they got on the SJW train and started hiring these grossly unqualified people. And these grossly unqualified people who've never worked in comics or never read comics, they're writing these incredibly bad stories, and they're starting to derail Valiant's momentum. And Valiant could pull it out, but the whole thing is their editorial has to get itself back on track, and they really need somebody to set a direction for them. You need to go find yourself some really talented writers and some really talented editors. They desperately need talented editors, but the big problem is you got, like I said, DMG bought them, then they hired Heather Antos and Vita Ayala, and now they're in a really bad place right now. Yeah, Vita Ayala is a woman, and she's writing Livewire right now, and she has no comic experience, and it shows on her page. And this is the big problem with the comic book industry, is you get a lot of people, they are here, but they've never written a story. They've never written a comic script. They've never written any sort of anything. And these people are writing comics, and they don't know anything about story models, story paradigms, character development. They don't know anything, and they're writing these comics, and that's why the comics are so bad these days, because you're just hiring somebody without any experience whatsoever, and you're just hiring them because either they're black or lesbian, Hispanic, a woman, and those aren't qualifications. Those are ethnicities and identities, and that's all part of identity politics, is you hire somebody for their identity, not for their skill. For example, I mean, yes, I'm a black man, but I have over 25 years of experience as a writer. I have over 25 years of experience writing novels, about 15 years writing screenplays, and about 4 or 5 years writing comic scripts. So I have experience writing those things. And if you looked at my records based on the merits of my 60 books, and you looked at my sample chapters on my blog, I would meet all the qualifications to write comics, but none of those people would want to talk to me because I don't fit their politics or their narrative. What's up, Goku MGTOW? I look at the comic book industry, and they just hire people based on identity, and that's why their industry is falling apart, instead of going out here looking for people who have experience and a skill set, because there are lots of people out there who have experience and skills, but they don't want to hire them because they want to push an agenda and say, oh, we've got this black woman working here who is a lesbian on a lesbian comic, and they want to try to sell to these websites and get hits and clicks on the website, instead of trying to create content that will appeal to the casual readers out there and create good content that will get the readers interested in buying the next comic. And that's why you need to have an editor who has publishing experience, because an editor with publishing experience, first thing he's going to do is ask what you worked on, and then he's going to ask to take a look at your samples, because your samples are going to let me know what type of writing style you have, one, how you develop characters, how you write dialogue, And if you're an artist, I want to look at your art samples because I want to get example of your compositions and your figures. And I also want to get an understanding of how your art style works because for certain characters, I need a certain art style because or a certain story, I need a certain art style, and I need to make sure that your art style and your character compositions fit. Because if I put like a really manga type artist on a dark type story, they may not be a good fit, and it may keep people from getting into the story. Or if I put an artist who's too cartoony on a story, they may not be able to fit either. So I have to find artists that are a good fit. So that's one of the things I do whenever I'm looking for an artist to do covers. Like when I hired Bill Walker to do these two covers, I said that his art style would fit the characters, and that's one of the things I look for when I was looking for an artist to do covers. Is I was looking for an artist who could fit the characters in the story, and that's something that editorial isn't doing right now because editorial is more about social currency and identity politics than telling stories. What's up, Turtle Sage? Yeah, I'm glad to see you here. This is his first time I've seen him on the stream. Hardcore H, I heard about IDW going down. I mean, they have been falling apart for years, and they were trying to stave things off, but they just can't stave things off because they IDW has been in a bad place for some time because they wanted to push identity politics, and they were doing well. They had the Hasbro licenses, they had the Transformers, they had GI Joe, they had Gem, but their big problem was they didn't have any leadership at the top. And when they fired Chris Real, they would look like they were going to try to change direction, but then because they were their own worst enemy, once again, they went and rehired Chris Real because they wanted to have their smooth world. They wanted to be comfortable, and they didn't want to go through the pain of growth. And this is one of the reasons why I believe they keep going back. People in the comic book industry keep going back and making the exact same mistakes, is because they want to live in the smooth world. They want to be able to have no problems and obstacles because the road to success is filled with problems and obstacles. And in order to get to success, you have to deal with conflict, you have to deal with problems, you have to go through pain. And a lot of these people, they would rather see the industry collapse and be comfortable rather than try to go through the pain of trying to make those real serious efforts to reach new readers and try to create a product that, appeals to customers, because a lot of them, they are comfortable making their comics with all this graphic violence and gore and all of these identity politics and far leftist narratives because that makes them comfortable, and they don't want to go out of their way to make a product that appeals to everyone because that would make them uncomfortable. But if you want to make money, you're going to have to come out of your comfort zone and go out here and make those efforts, because that's the only way you're going to be able to make a living and get success in any industry. Because as a publisher myself, I had to come out of my comfort zone numerous times because I wanted to keep moving forward. I mean, I remember when I was doing hand-drawn covers and people told me, you know what, we don't like these covers that you're drawing. So I listened to my customers, and that's when I started going out here looking for artists like Bill Walko and Mike Williams and Drew Swift to do my covers, because I realized that I couldn't do it by myself, and I had to go and make those efforts to improve the quality of my product so that I could reach new readers. And that's something people don't want to do. They don't want to come out of their comfort zone because a lot of these people, especially the new SJWs, they feel entitled to these jobs, and they don't want to go out here and make those efforts to come out of their comfort zone and really just start trying to do new things, explore new concepts, and try to make things fresh. I heard about Jonathan Hickman on X-Men, but the problem with Marvel is they're going to undermine him. He might actually fix it because he did a good job of fixing Fantastic Four, and he did a good job of fixing Avengers. But the problem is is that they don't have an editor who can make it where they can transition. And they've had that problem since 2001. They'll have one good writer like Kurt Busiek. I mean, he made a spectacular run on the Avengers, and they couldn't pass the baton on to somebody else. And that when the problem with Marvel was since then, they just don't know how to transition from one creative team to another. They don't know how to pass that baton on from the A writer to the B writer and keep the book fresh. And this is something that has been exacerbated by all of these celebrity writers, because what Marvel does is when the book starts to falter, they want to go out here and find another celebrity writer. But the problem is you have to have a way to keep your writers trained so that when the book passes on, that's a major problem. You want to have it where it passes on and people don't really feel anything. Because I remember when Bill Messner-Loebs was doing Flash, and then Mark Waid took over, and it was like organic transition. I mean, that was one of the best transitions. I mean, it was like Wally his voice never changed, his narrative never changed. The character progressed, even though you had two different writers, you still got great stories, and all you saw was the character. Same thing for your Jim Starlin when he was working on Batman, and then we transitioned, I believe, over to Alan Grant. We still got good stories, and all we saw was Batman. We didn't get to see the celebrity writer. So this is some of the things that I see with Marvel. The whole thing is that they don't know how to transition and pass on. Now, Super Cosmic Mutant Honey Candle Squid makes a good point. Yeah, they don't want to pass on. They want to be able to take credit for everything while erasing the past. That's what he's saying or she's saying. But they do want to take credit for everything. They want to be a superstar, but the only way you can become, a really iconic writer is not being a superstar. You just make good stories, and your stories are going to be part of a larger tapestry. The whole thing is that we got guys who want to be superstars, and they want to be able to be the definitive writer, and they want to erase the past, like he's saying. And yeah, they want to do that. But the whole thing is then their run just winds up becoming forgotten, ironically, because they have a reboot and everything winds up getting forgotten. Mobar makes a good point. Yeah, the hero's journey is a long one. Writing is supposed to mirror life, like the aspect. And yeah, that's been missing, because a hero's journey is you go from one story to the next, and it's just like life. I mean, when I'm doing John Haynes or ISIS, I just go from one story to the next, and we just get those slices of their life, and that's what gives us their story. And it's going to be a long story, but we're not getting that anymore as related to the hero's journey anymore. And even the heroine's journey, we're not getting that, because no one's really focused on character transformation arcs. Nobody's really focused on developing these characters, and nobody's really focused on really making these characters be like us or related to us. And this is why a lot of entertainment is very shallow these days. But as I see it, when I do stories, I want to give readers that mirror of life, and I want to give them that slice of life. And I really want people to see that hero's journey or that heroine's journey, where these characters change, these characters grow from their experiences, and they learn from their experiences, because we learn from them and we learn with them. And that's something I really would like. I put in my books, but I'm seeing is not being put in books these days. Yeah, I read some Busiek Avengers, J-Bob, and they were very good. I mean, it was like almost like the old days of the Shooter Perez run, which I have in my collection. And that was one of the things that made it great, is that Busiek really he paid homage to the past while making it fresh for the future. And I think Hickman may do that on X-Men, and I hope if he does that, it might be strong. I think Jeff Johns is taking so long on Doomsday Clock because Dan Dido is making a mess of the things, and he's trying to find a way to weave New 52 in, because the Doomsday Clock was supposed to take us back to classic DC, and it would have been a great launch point to relaunch the entire DC brand. But because Jeff Johns is gone, we're going right back to the abyss that we're in now, because Heroes in Crisis #8 really, that was a nail in the coffin for DC readers. That and Batman, that latest issue of Batman, which pointed up a middle finger up at DC. Supremo, I don't know if it was a good idea to mix Watchmen with the mainstream DCU. And as I look right now, if it doesn't lead to classic DCU coming back, it's going to be a big disaster for DC. So that's why I don't think it's a good idea. It was a plot device. Dr. Manhattan was a plot device to try to get people out of the New 52. But because of what happened with Geoff Johns changing his job, what happened was we started to see that everything he was doing wound up getting lost, and the whole thing is going to fall apart as I see it. Hardcore H makes a good point. I've said that about Geoff Johns myself in videos and blogs, because when I look at Geoff Johns, he mirrors Chris Claremont. Now, Chris Claremont was the original writer of the X-Men, and at one time in the 80s, he was taking on at least 5 or 6 books, and he was taking on too much. And because he was taking on too much, we started to see a real serious decline in his storytelling. And I noticed that around 1988 with Inferno, and I noticed it with another story he did, one with the Reavers, where he didn't really pay it off very well. So Geoff Johns is doing what Chris Claremont did, in that, yes, he was an acclaimed author and he was trying to do everything, but because he tried to do everything, his whole quality of writing fell off and his skills fell off. So I looked at it and I said, there's a lot of mirrors between him and Chris Claremont. And then Chris Claremont fell into obscurity because he took on too much. And no writer should take on too much. A good writer understands their limitations and takes on as much as they need to take on. They don't try to take on more than that, because then the quality of your storytelling falls off. And the last thing you want to do is have the quality of your storytelling fall off, because that's one of the reasons that I even though I do a lot of books, I've been trying to pull back, because when I come out, I want my books to meet a certain standard. So that's why I used to do like 4 or 5 books a year. This year I'm only doing 3, because I just don't want to come out here with a bad book or a bad story. And I want to make sure that every book that a reader gets is of the highest quality. Because right now I'm taking on ISIS, John Haynes, and E-Steam, and I don't have a nonfiction project I'm doing this year. Usually I do a nonfiction project, and sometimes I do a novel, like when I was doing the Spinsterella trilogy books. I was doing Spinsterella, ISIS, E-Steam, and last year I was doing John Haynes. And I usually used to do 4 or 5 projects, but this time I've been trying to slow it down because I want to make sure that I give you the best quality. And the whole thing is, a writer has to know their limitations. And it looks like Geoff doesn't know his own, because he's trying to write movie scripts, TV scripts, comics, and that's just too much for a writer to take on. You need time to breathe and you need time to relax. And that's something a writer really needs. Yeah, I do miss the days when Chris Claremont and John Byrne were a team. I mean, those comics were classic. I mean, John Byrne's art was like looking at photos, Supremo. And that's why I'm glad I got a chance to read those books back in the day, because it was just looking like a photo. Some of the best art I've ever seen. Mobar 7170, he says woke is the trend. But the whole thing is, when companies go woke, they just get broke, because, like you said, there's no payoff, no growth, and no lessons learned. And that's one of the reasons why nobody buys comics, because there's nothing there. It's just a bunch of characters standing around doing nothing, or going out to eat or go out and do stuff. But when you have stories, you have to give people something in order for them to keep buying it. You have to give them a joke, a laugh, or a lesson, something, in order to get their money. And this is something comic companies just haven't been doing. Hardcore H. A lot of books I buy these days, they usually are trade paperbacks. I would love to buy a giant size X-Men omnibus. That's something I would love to get. But a lot of people, they're saying they're buying trades and stuff, but even the trades have suffered because they printed a lot of new 52 and a lot of the newer trades. But the classic stuff, it sells well, but the newer stuff doesn't really sell that well. And that's why we saw at Ollie's all those trades for $3 and $4 because they had reprinted all this material trying to pad it for trade, but the stories just aren't good enough. But the classics, they always sell well. I get a lot of good deals on them on eBay sometimes. Like I got Return of Barry Allen for about $5. That was the classic Wally West story that really defined Wally West and why he became the Flash and why he cares so much about being the Flash. And when I think about Return of Barry Allen compared to what they did to him in Heroes in Crisis, it's just one of those things that it would make you mad because you think about what Wally did to fight to become the Flash and take on that role and honoring his uncle and his uncle's legacy. And they just slapped that character in the face. And the fans of Wally West, who followed that character for over 20 years, and then they just did this with Heroes in Crisis. And that's why I believe there's going to be a crisis at DC Comics as related to editorial, because they don't love the characters and they don't love the idea of legacy characters, which is something that is a major part of DC Comics, is legacy characters and pushing the legacy. Because when DC Comics, when usually you have other characters who take on the mantle of other characters, and that's something Dan Dido is against, but that's something that's been organically ingrained in DC Comics ever since its inception. Okay, Mike, but that's another thing that makes Dan Dido his own worst enemy, is that he doesn't like things that are intrinsic to DC Comics, and he doesn't understand that the sidekicks, they are a major part of DC's history. I mean, sidekicks are legacy characters, and to say that you don't like legacy characters, then you shouldn't be at DC Comics. And that's one of the reasons why I have an issue with him, is that you say that you're against things, but these things are intrinsic to DC's overall brand. I don't know that much about the current X-Men run, but that's the whole thing. Marvel will, once the book starts to fall past a certain level, they'll bring on a good writer, and then what will happen is the book will be well good for a little while, but then they'll just fall back again. Okay, but I look at the comic book industry and they desperately need to get out of their own way, and that's the thing that I see with them. It's like you can't get in your own way when you're a writer or a publisher, because if you have a book that's selling, it's a very easy thing to do is just step aside and let the book sell. And that's something I learned how to do over the years, is letting go. And that's something a writer has to do with a book. Once they finish a book, is just let it go and let that book just sell itself. And the whole thing is that these people at Marvel and DC, they don't know when to let go of things. I don't know about Agent of Wakanda Supremo. I don't know about that book. I haven't heard of it. I haven't read it. I've been reading certain books. Online, I read Dynamite books and I read other books. I read a couple of Dynamites. I've read a couple of Marvels here and there, but I haven't read that one. That rumor's been going around for a while that Disney is going to shut down the comics division. That rumor has been going around. I heard Diversity in Comics talk about that a while back. And it's something that may happen, because if they take on enough losses, Disney may be forced to shut down the Marvel division and then fold it into another division. And that may wind up happening. But the whole thing is what's going to happen then is we're going to see a smaller, tighter catalog, and we're going to see a completely different set of standards. Or if they shut it down, they may start outsourcing books to places like IDW, but IDW is going out of business. So I don't think they're going to be able to outsource there, because they're getting ready to go out of business. And that's something I don't see happening with the state of IDW right now, but they may outsource to another small company in the future. But I see it as them folding it into one of Disney's divisions, like Houghton Mifflin or one of the other ones they have Miramax Books or one of these other companies. And I see that as the future of Marvel. And then they use the editors there to run Marvel. And if they do that again, they're going to change the standards altogether, and they're going to make a completely different product than what we're getting right now. I would love to be on Comics Explained. I didn't see Endgame, David Little, because I'm done with the MCU at this point, and I've seen enough bad movies, and I'm pretty much done with them, because at this point they have deviated so far from the course as related to the source material that I don't even want to bother with it anymore. Because when I looked at the Endgame synopsis, it just was a real slap in the face to storytelling. And as a writer, I saw so many plot holes and so many inconsistencies that it just really irritated me overall. If Disney shuts down the comic division, then what they're going to do is go full steam with this SJW Marvel, which is what Kevin Feige looks like he's going on that course. So that's where it looks like it's going right now. Mecha Slasher looks like he's getting ready to take the movies into the SJW division, and it looks like they're going to try to push that agenda now, because the comics now are going to be just like the movies. So they're going to make the movies just like the comics, which is going to make people not want to go see them. Yeah, Patrick, the X-Men in the 80s were great. I mean, I have a lot of those books in my milk crates. Those were some great books. Not a fan. I think. Oh, I heard. Yeah, I did hear Shang-Chi is in Phase 4 Supremo, but I'm not. I think that's going to be an SJW movie where they're going to put some gynocentrism in there. And if they treat Shang-Chi like the way they did Danny Rand, that's not something I would want to see. Yeah, but there are plot holes in Endgame. There are things as related to structure, and there are things as related to ethics, and that's why I walked away with the from the MCU, and I'm not going to be bothered with it anymore. Because what they did is they slapped the audience in the face, as I see it, as related to storytelling, and everything they talked about was feelings. But a good writer doesn't come into storytelling with feelings. A good writer comes into storytelling because they understand the structure of storytelling, they understand the form of storytelling, and they want people to see full character transformation arcs, character development, and they want them to see things transpire in an organic fashion. And when I saw them coming in with the time travel, it just showed me that they had no respect for the audience, because when you come in with a plot device like time travel, it shows that you just don't care, and you just want to try to just take advantage of the audience. And that just was a real insult to me when they came in here with the time travel to try to fix an entire story, when there was an organic way to fix that story, but they just didn't want to go that route. And they wanted to give you this 3-hour movie to do things where they just half did everything. And that was another slap in the face to people. And I just looked at that Endgame and I just said, no, I'm not even going to bother with this. Why should I spend $15 on a movie if they can't spend an effort to give me a quality story? Yeah, you make a good point, Morbar 7170. Yeah, this is what happens when you're concerned with pumping out 3 movies a year after year. Yeah, the quality just falls off, and then you don't get any payoff. So I live in New York, Boogiemans, and yeah, the movies are expensive here. Yeah, Rocket Man, you make a good point. Yeah, when Captain America did go back in time, that changed the entire timeline, and I believe they did that because of the Agent Carter series and that second season when Agent Carter, where Peggy was looking at that black scientist, and these racists, they wanted to retcon that whole storyline. So you saw Peggy Carter with the black man in season one. And if Steve goes back in time, she never gets involved with that black man. But what that does is it derails the foundations of S.H.I.E.L.D. because Agent Carter was supposed to be about the foundation of S.H.I.E.L.D., but now because they did that, they derailed their entire universe and its own timeline. So that's another reason why I'm not going to bother with the movie, because they don't even respect the universe they've built or the timeline they have built. And that was a complete disrespect to all of those people who watch these shows, like Agent Carter. And that's all they did, was they retconned all of it so they could go and do things that way. Yeah, Marvel is pushing Blade, but the way they're pushing Blade is so that they can have another token Negro. They had him as a delivery man for the last couple of issues, and now they're trying to push him, and they're just going to make him look bad. That's a good point, Rocket Man. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers would not exist if Cap stayed with Peggy, so they have literally destroyed their own continuity, because when you do one thing in time, it destroys all the other things. That was the point I made in East-Team The Sands of Time, because if something is out of place in time, then all the events wind up erasing, and then you wind up with the universe crumbling. And the same thing happened with Back to the Future. And Marty McFly, the longer he stayed there, he was going to make it where he didn't exist. But in this MCU, you have your Kevin Feige saying he's going to walk away from all those rules, not understanding that those rules are there for a reason. And those rules were there because if Steve Rogers goes back in time, he changes the entire history of the Marvel Universe. If he stays with Peggy, he just destroys the entire Marvel Universe. So I'm looking at it and I'm sitting there going, you sent him back in time, but if he goes back in time, that means there is no S.H.I.E.L.D. And if there is no S.H.I.E.L.D., that means there are no Avengers. And it also means that S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't get him out of the ice. So the entire MCU completely collapses due to this bad storyline. And most people, they're not going to see how bad this storyline is until a couple of weeks from now, when they start to really sit down and think about this film critically. Because when you look at Endgame, it reminds me a lot of Batman and Robin, where you're sitting there, you're watching it, and then later on when you get home, you go, that was really stupid. So I'm looking at that whole thing, and it's like, we have a real serious problem here, but nobody's really addressing it as related to the film critically and saying, look, this whole thing where they had that ending, yes, it made people feel, but it destroyed the entire structure of the MCU. But it's a complete mess as I see it. I just see it as, yeah, I'll make a slasher. Endgame is just a bunch of special effects, but then Googie, yeah, the whole thing is that the critics are being bought and paid for, similar to what happened to Last Jedi, because I see what they did with Last Jedi. They put all this praise and accolades out there, and most of these people, they know that a lot of the comic fans are in their feelings about these characters, but they are just in their feelings, and that's why they are talking about the film is so good, but they're not digesting what they watch. When you digest what you watch, you sit there and you go, I just watched Batman and Robin all over again, because when I read the whole synopsis of the film, it reminded me so much of Batman and Robin. And these people are praising it. The critics will praise it like they did Last Jedi, but it's not until you have the fandom come in, and sadly the fandom is so in their feelings that they're not thinking about the film critically. Now, when I think of the film critically, I see all the problems with the film, and I see all the structure issues, I see the story issues, and the whole Captain America arc just destroys the entire MCU. And I believe that was done selfishly because Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers didn't want anybody messing with their product, and they didn't want anybody messing with their universe. So they went out of their way to destroy their universe. Now, I believe that was kind of selfish to do that, because when it comes down to comic characters, people should be able to pass the baton on to somebody else. And what these people did, because they were selfish, is they didn't want to pass that baton on to the next generation of creators to work with these characters. So that's something I saw being done with this whole thing with the MCU. But they just decided they wanted to have their MCU, and they were going to have their MCU without, and it was going to be theirs and theirs only. It's similar to what Nolan and Goyer did with the Dark Knight trilogy. They wanted to be able to have their Batman, and they didn't want anybody else to have their own Batman. So I felt that that was kind of selfish, because these characters don't belong to one creator. When it comes down to characters, they should be anybody's characters, and we should be able to get them passed on from one to the other. And what are my thoughts on Zack Snyder? I think that he was just being nasty, because that's not who Batman and Superman are. Batman is not a killer. Superman is not a killer. And what he was doing was showing that he is just not qualified to make a DC movie, because he doesn't understand the fundamentals of DC Comics characters. DC comic characters are icons, they are ideals of good, and they stand up for ideals of good. Batman doesn't kill, and neither does Superman. And this was reflected in many stories, and it shows that Zack Snyder didn't read any of those stories, which is why he should have never been in charge of the DC Cinematic Universe, and it just shows why his DC Cinematic Universe failed completely. Charles Rodriguez, you make a good point, but I don't think they're going to reboot. They're just going to, yeah, they're going to replace it with SJW Marvel, because we see that with Captain Marvel with her boy cut hair. We see it with the girl power scene. We see it with the announcement of all of these gay and diverse characters. And we know Ironheart is probably going to be coming soon, because with Tony Stark dead, we know that Ironheart is coming. So at this point, it's just time to walk away from the MCU, because the MCU is finished as it is. And the sad part is it finished on a low note, because I believe if they had finished with the conclusion like JLU's Destroyer, what could have had is that you had the heroes defeat the villain and then go on to fight another day. And that would have been the perfect ending to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It would have been very satisfying, and it would have left people anticipating the next story. And it didn't have to be an Iron Man story or a Captain America story. You could have made Marvel movies for years featuring characters, but because of this ending and the start of SJW MCU, you're going to have people not really wanting to be bothered with the MCU at this point. Do I think that Marvel and Netflix sabotaged Iron Fist? I do believe that they did, but I believe part of it is the series was rushed out. But I believe that the series never really got the chance it deserved. But I don't know if Marvel and Netflix sabotaged it, but I believe it was the rushing that really lowered the quality on that show, because they really didn't delve deep enough into Danny Rand or Danny Rand's story to really give us a really good story as related to him. And then they wanted to push the identity politics and the gynocentrism, and that put the nail in the coffin for that show. The elements were there to make a great Iron Fist show, but because the writers weren't thinking about telling a good story, that's why the whole series just fell completely apart, because they were more about rushing things and rushing the identity politics in season 2. And the series just never really took off. Plus, they cast that Finn Jones, and he just was too soft to play that role. He didn't have any screen presence. He didn't have any masculinity. And yeah, he felt, like Supremo was saying, he felt like a supporting character in his own show. He never really came to stand out. And what was really sad was with the Cage series, they showed us that there could have been something with Iron Fist, some potential, but they didn't really. The sad part is the Iron Fist writers never really developed his character in any way, shape, or form at all. I mean, they made Colleen Wing a superwoman where she was beating up people, but Danny Rand should have been doing everything Colleen Wing was doing, because what they were doing was pushing the gynocentrism and the feminism, and that made it, or the series you just didn't want to see, just like with Punisher season 2, where they completely emasculated Frank Castle and they made him into a complete wimp, and they ruined what Frank Castle was all about. I mean, that's Punisher season 2. That was a thorough disappointment. I'm going to get ready to wrap the stream up in about 30 minutes because it's 11:35 right now. But I look at things and yeah, it looks like the whole comic book industry, they're in trouble, but the MCU is in trouble too, because the MCU, this Endgame may be their last stop, because Endgame was the last movie that they're probably gonna make a lot of money with this film in the opening weekend. But now that we know that SJW Marvel is coming, I think that Disney's going to be in a lot of trouble with the big picture, because now that everybody knows that this is coming, they're going to be looking at these films and getting ready to walk away from them, because I walked away last year with Infinity War, but I look at this Endgame and I see where people are going to walk away from everything, because now we know that SJW Marvel is coming, and because we know SJW Marvel is coming to the movies, this is when people are going to start looking for new characters and looking for new things to do. And what's sad now is there is no Wesley Snipes to come in and save things like he did with Blade back in '98. Well, Aaron, those details are all over. Have been on Wikipedia since yesterday, so those details, there's nothing I can do with. So, and you're going to hear about them everywhere. No, I haven't checked out Injustice. I haven't seen the story based on it. I've been watching clips of Mortal Kombat 11. Supremo, I think we might be going back to those days, because when I look at the MCU, it's there's not much they can do anymore. But they'll try to. You'll see other studios making heroes, like with Will Smith, the Gemini Man. You see them trying to go back to there and make their own characters. I think we're going to be heading towards that, because now that everybody knows that the SJW Marvel is coming, they know that the Marvel Studios is vulnerable. So now they're going to try to come in, now that they know that it's finished, and try to bring their own franchises up from there. That's a good point. But USA Today will probably spoil it this weekend. What's up, Luciano? I'm glad to see you here at the stream. I'm getting ready to wrap up in about 20 minutes. I know you woke up at 10 o'clock. I'm going to try to leave a link to Esteem Goddess of, which is available on Amazon right now. You can pick that one up on Amazon. I'm leaving a link to that one. That is one of the first books of the 2019 SJS Direct Catalog. All That Glitters is Okay, I'm gonna leave a link to Isis All That Glitters, and you can pick that one up on Amazon as well. The two books from the SJS Direct 2019 catalog, I've left links to them, so if you want to pick them up. I didn't hear about that. Have not seen Doom Patrol, Dark Soul, but I'm gonna take a look at that soon. Just like I'm gonna take a look at this Justice League movie. Gonna be looking at all that soon, as soon as I get my DC subscription. I think they're going to have to bring Kang into the MCU to fix that whole Captain America mess. And I believe Kang the Conqueror will be coming, probably. But the whole thing is that I don't know how they're going to work it. But if the Russos are gone, I believe they're going to have to bring Kang the Conqueror in to make things right, if they're interested in going in that direction. Aaron asks the question, do you think this will be a golden age for indie comics? Yeah, I think it might be a golden age because it's the only place we're going to get good stories, because when we look at the mainstream publishers, they're their own worst enemy and they undermine their own success. Whereas indie creators, they're not, and when they get their success, they're willing to go and work with it, and they're willing to go where the customers are. So I believe that the golden age for indies is going to be coming soon if the industry does continue on the state of decline where we're seeing people ordering less, comic shops going out of business. I believe that the future for comics is going to be print on demand, and it's going to be done by indie publishers who do crowdfunding. Yeah, I heard about that Doom Patrol with the black man in a dress, and that's not something I want to see, but that's par for the course with your Greg Berlanti, because your Greg Berlanti has an issue with heterosexual black men, and he goes out of his way to emasculate black men in every production he creates. So that's just par for the course with him. I don't think they would do Dr. Doom right, because Dr. Doom is very masculine. He's very alpha, and they would try to find some way to soften him the way they did Black Panther, because Marvel Studios has an issue with alpha males. So if they did Dr. Doom, they're going to try to find some way to emasculate him in today's society. Yeah, time travel stories aren't easy to pull off. Having written one, I know how tough they are. Supremo. I mean, Sands of Time was not an easy story to write. I mean, that was a very tough one for me to put together. And yeah, time travel stories, you have to be very careful with what you do. I'm going to leave a link to Sands of Time. But it's very difficult to put together try to put a link. But time travel stories are very difficult to write. I mean, very, very difficult to write. And every element in a time travel story has to be just right, because the universe has to go back to the way it was. And if you don't do it right, what will happen is the entire story will fall completely apart. I don't know if Wolverine will be done well in the MCU. I don't really trust the people who are currently in charge. They might make him look aesthetically good, but I don't think they're going to stay true to the story. If they continue on with the storytelling they did with Spider-Man Homecoming, where they literally ignore all of his history, I don't have much faith in Marvel Studios to make a quality Wolverine adaptation. Well, they have that power, Luciano, because they control the publishing business, and that's why they promote the narrative. When you are a publisher, you control the media and you control the narrative. So you can promote as much racism as you want in your stories, because you own the characters, you own the stories, and you own the platforms. So that's how they get away with that. So one of the reasons why I publish, books in the SJS Direct imprint, like Isis All That Glitters, is because I want to give people a balanced picture of Black heroines and Black people. And I want to present a positive image of Black people. And that's why I make my own stuff, because I understand that they have a lot of power, but I have power as well to make my own stories and not buy theirs. Yeah, that's true. They did cancel Hawk because, yeah, black men liked that character because he was strong, masculine, and he was in charge. And Hawk was a Josie Rodriguez. Hawk was a character came out in 1989, I believe. It was a spinoff of Spencer for Hire called A Man Called Hawk, and Avery Brooks played Spencer's partner Hawk. And the character was so popular, they spun him off into his own series on Saturday nights at 10, I believe. And black men were gravitating to it because it was one of the few drama series out there that had a black man as a lead character, and two, it was very action packed and it presented a very positive picture of black culture. And they canceled the series after one season, and it was one of the worst things they could have done because black men liked that character. They loved how masculine he was, they loved how strong he was, and they loved that he was a strong leader type black man. And it could have been something that they could have allowed to stay on, but ABC just didn't like the idea of people seeing a strong masculine man in a leadership role. But you can catch a couple of A Man Called Hawk episodes on YouTube. I caught a couple about 10 years ago, and it was a really underrated series that people slept on. Goku Midtown, no, I'm not going to go see Endgame. I'm going to just sit this one out because I got burnt by Infinity War and Black Panther, and I'm done with the MCU at this point. So I'm not even going to bother watching the film after I've read the synopsis for the film. It looks like a jumbled mess. So I'm going to pass on Endgame because I feel like after getting burnt with Black Panther and Infinity War, I'm just not spending any more money on MCU movies because the quality just isn't there. Okay, you got 4. But I'm just done with it. I haven't seen that Dark Soul yet. Yeah, Luciano, I do think the comic book industry has been looking into Hollywood for too much for the last 15 years, and they haven't been looking at their own business. And this is a big problem with them. They have been dependent on the Hollywood to keep their characters in print and keep their characters alive, and they're not really focusing on building their own publishing business. And I believe their publishing business is really going to suffer now that the MCU is pretty much wrapped up overall. And I believe they're going to be in a lot of trouble because once they start pushing these SJW movies, I believe the nail is going to be in their coffin. Could the movies be fixed? Yeah, I think the movies could be fixed, but it would require them going out here and hiring quality writers and hiring directors with a vision and just letting those people do what they do best and not interfere with things and not try to force identity politics or do things like do things that damage the character, like what happened with Captain America, what they in this Endgame, or what they did with Iron Man, where they made it where the character couldn't be used again by another actor. DC films, I believe DC can pull things out. Mecha Slasher, I believe it can pull it out. They show that they have promise with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Shazam, and if they stick with the classic DC model, they can go out here and they can take the crown from Marvel. I believe if they just focus on getting their stuff together, they could take things from Marvel and Marvel Studios and really take the whole thing back from them. Because when I look at Aquaman, I look at Shazam, and I look at Wonder Woman, I see the quality on the screen, and all they have to do is just stay true to the characters and stay true to the source material, and they could be a major force. I mean, Rocket Man, you make some good points. I mean, it's really sad that Mortal Kombat 11 with Kano's storyline did a better job with time travel than all of Avengers Endgame, because in one scene, Sonya kills the past Kano, which kills the future Kano. And she does this to protect her daughter's future, and it made more sense than all of Endgame's time travel silliness. Yeah, timeline is just a wreck at this point. And when you have timelines, it becomes a nightmare. That's why you have to know what you're doing when you're doing a time travel story. Well, I heard about that. I think that was an indie comic called The Boys. I have to take a look at that, but I don't have Amazon Prime. But I would have to take a look at the comic because the comic is coming out in an omnibus. Um, I heard about The Boys. I heard about some things about it. I'll have to take a look at it. But yeah, Goku MGTOW, time travel is not something you want to put in a story, and it's a sign that when your writers are bad, they don't know what they're doing. And the only thing that could fix it is Kang the Conqueror, and he's a tough character to work with. But time travel, that's a sign that a writer is in trouble. And any good writer will tell you that when you start bringing in time travel, your whole story is going to fall completely apart. I mean, I was hesitant to do Easting the Sands of Time because I feared it would mess up the SJS Direct universe. But after studying Back to the Future and Star Trek, I understood that everything has to go back in order for a time travel story to work because everything has to fit within the universe. And after watching Terminator, I understood the paradox of that story. So I understood, the foundations of time travel. So if you're going to do it, you have to do it in a way that makes everything go back. Otherwise, you're just going to make a complete mess. I don't know if Marvel will do another black version of a character, but with the things going badly at Marvel as related to forced diversity, I don't know if they want to do that on screen. Rocket Man makes a good point. Yeah, if Captain America goes back in time, then will the Avengers exist? So again, it's him getting out of the ice that starts the Avengers initiative. And if he goes back, never goes back into the ice. So the whole thing just falls completely apart. SC Son, glad to see you. I'm getting ready to wrap up the stream in about 8 minutes. Why did they make Titans psychotic? Because Greg Berlanti has issues. That's why Dick Grayson is a nut job on Titans, because Dick Grayson in the comics is one of the most balanced and stable people you'll ever see in the universe. And Goku, yeah, it's hard to write time travel stories, but you can do it if you understand things like Star Trek: The Next Generation, Back to the Future, and Terminator. Once you watch those films, you get a good understanding of how time travel works, and that'll help you understand how to iron things out. But the whole thing is, the events have to happen, and there's nothing you can do to make them not happen. I mean, if you make one thing not happen, it changes everything. And that's something I also learned from a movie with Jim Belushi called Mr. Destiny, where one event can just change the whole person's life. Rob IS asks, is Dick Grayson a beta male? Definitely not. Dick Grayson is as alpha as they come. Yeah, Mr. Destiny was very good at time travel and was good at showing how one event can change everything. And it's an underrated movie. I mean, it was very, very good at exploring time travel and helping us understand how changing one thing can change everything. I don't know if there'll be a possibility of bringing in the Invaders as far as time travel goes with Marvel. But with Captain America going back in time, that could possibly happen. But the whole thing is the timeline is just completely destroyed at this point. So I don't know how they would work, because he erased everything as related to Howard Stark and S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything with Gabriel Jones. Everything has been erased. So it's going to be hard to do everything without the structures. So they have done a really poor job with this end game, and the end game has really made a mess of everything. Yeah, that's a good question, Supremo. What happened with the Rob IS, I'm pondering doing a Man Crisis one next Friday, but I want to do a goth one um on one day, 1 week, one night live stream. But it's up in the air. I might do a Man Crisis one on Wednesday, and I might do a goth one next Friday. Got to see. That might be the thing that I do. I'm still trying to ponder what topics I want to do. But I might do a live stream talking about the nice guy and the jerk, because I just did a video on that I really enjoyed doing, and it's gotten over very well. Yeah, I want to do another goth live stream, but I'm pondering the topic for that one. I don't know if goths would want me to do an entire live stream about the Spinsterella trilogy. I don't know how many goths would want to watch that one, but I might do that one where I talk about the Spinsterella trilogy, or I might do another one where I talk about another subject about the scene. And because I like doing the ones where I talk about things that's related to substance in the scene, but it's still up in the air. But I want to do one about the nice guy and the jerk, and that might be next Wednesday's live stream. But I wanted to do a goth one soon. I really want to do a goth one. And because a lot of goths do watch my live streams, and yeah, the Wednesday at 12 noon, that might be about the nice guy and the jerk, and I may elaborate a bit more about it as related to the nice guy and the jerk, and how they're two sides of the same coin, and how both of them are okay. Rob IS, that's the one I'm going to do, nice guy and the jerk. But I want to do a goth one because I have some really. I want to do one. I want to do one soon, but I just want to get the right topic. I'm thinking about Spinsterella trilogy for next Fridays, and I also want to bring up a proposal for goths that I think they'd like. I had this idea about a goth Soul Train, where I fuse the idea of Soul Train and the goth subculture, because with goth subculture being all about music, and Soul Train was a show about music, that's something I want to talk to people in the scene about, because I think it would be so cool to see goths doing a Soul Train, like a Soul Train show. I think it would be a show that would be a real hit. But I'm going to get ready to wrap this stream up. As I see it right now, the comic book industry is its own worst enemy, and it's undermining its own success. It could have had a lot more success. I mean, here we have superhero movies at the height of their popularity, and they are still out here not able to even sell 8,000 copies of their new characters, or 50,000 copies of their most popular characters. And that's all because editors undermine themselves. And instead of them going along with what's working, they work against themselves. And as I see it, comic book industry in some way, Rob IS asked, it's not a comic book with Soul Train, it's a TV show. And it's a TV show is popular with black people back in the 60s up to the 90s. Okay. And I'm going to try to propose that on the next Goth live stream. Will your suggestions still make it? No, black men are signing up. They don't need to go with any party, and they can make their own decision. And that's what they're doing right now, is they're realizing that they don't have to go with any group. They can be their own people. So that's why nobody's trying to identify with any leftists anymore. They're just going their own way. And Barack Obama burned them. I might do that. I want to do another Spinsterella book. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still outlining it. So because with Spinsterella, I want to put a lot more African-American culture in with the goth subculture. So I might put some soul themes and goth themes in it as related to things. It's getting ready. It's almost midnight right now, so I'm going to get ready to wrap this stream up. I would really appreciate it if you guys would go out and pick up a copy of Isis All That Glitters. or East-Team Goddess of, the 2 books in the 2019 SJS Direct catalog. And if you could pick up books like East-Team Ascension or Isis, All About the Goddess, all these books are available on Amazon.com right now. And I hope you can pick them up. I really would appreciate it. Thank you all for coming to tonight's live stream. And I'm hoping to have another one this Wednesday. And I'm hoping you learned something from this live stream about the comic book industry being its own worst enemy. I'm going to wrap this up right now, and everybody have a good night. And thank you for coming to the stream.